All right. Today we are fortunate to have Dale Markey Crimp with us. Dale has led the City of Issaquah's performance measurement since 2021, stewarding the city's effort to build more sustainable practices and processes and data-driven decision-making. She is an active member of the Government Performance Consortium and Local Government 2030. In 2022, she co-founded a regional association for early to mid-career local government analysts with an intent in providing more support, networking, and development for those new to local government. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Dale.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. It's great to be here today. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me a bear with my moment of technology. One second. We go. Here. Present. And I have a strange feeling I may need to swap screens here.
Yes.
Does that look good?
Oh, looks great.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My presentation today is entitled, You've Got Performance Measures, Now What? Navigating the What Works Cities certification process as a small to medium-sized city. I'm going to start my presentation today with a little bit of a story, a true story, a story of a road trip. The year was 2003, and my family was on a road trip on the way to my older cousin's wedding. We were making our way from the northwest corner of Connecticut to Washington, D.C., and we were gathered together in a family caravan. So aunts, uncles, cousins, many on the group that had made the drive previously, in fact, that had made the drive multiple times. So we had experienced navigators, and also at that point in our lives, even the young people in the car were experienced road trippers. And then at some point in this drive, I remember looking up in my backwards facing seat in the back of my parents' Volvo station wagon and noticing that there was water on one side, water on the other side, and that we were very much not in Washington, D.C., but we appeared to be at the literal end of the road. To find that we were in Cape May, New Jersey, not Washington, D.C. So what happened, and why am I sharing this tale of family road trip gone wrong at the top of a presentation about local government? I think there are a lot of analogies between this road trip and the sometimes the trip or the work journey that we are on in our day-to-day work. We often know the destination. We knew our destination. We knew we were headed to Washington, D.C. We had a plan for how to get there. We even had, maybe unlike government, the best technology that you could have in 2003. We had our road atlas. We had our printed out MapQuest directions. And we even had one of those very early chunky Garmin navigators that kind of you had to upload and connect to the computer to get the most up-to-date map and download it. It wasn't connected to any sort of cellular network, but it was sure snazzy at the time. But we also had gone awry in some ways that might feel familiar. We had made some assumptions about the journey that didn't necessarily play out. And while we had anticipated and planned to avoid some obstacles, we didn't necessarily always really research our alternatives very deeply. We knew where, like I said, where we were headed, but we weren't super clear on what our benchmarks we might expect to see along the way might be. And what perhaps feels very familiar, we did get there, but it took us an extra 3 hours and some backtracking to eventually get to our final destination. So what I want to share with you, and the purpose of my presentation today, is to share a little bit about it, how we've grown as a city that has a general goal in mind, to a city that's not just developed performance measures, but developed a way of truly planning and pursuing our work with purpose and data to guide us along our journey, to make sure that we're staying on track, and not just data as a thing to say we're using, but really how we've become an organization that uses data within and across our teams to make decisions, to communicate with the public and with each other, to hold ourselves accountable, and to continually improve our services along the journey. My hope is that by the end of this presentation, you're able to self-define where your own city or organization is in your own data-driven journey, and that you've got the beginnings of an idea about how to make performance measurement more meaningful, relevant, and actionable in your organization. I know that the title of this time references performance measures. This session is not going to be about establishing performance measures. It's going to be about engaging in the culture change to make performance a meaningful part of your day in and day out way of working. Just as a note, I guess, before I dive in, I'm really excited to answer questions, and I'm really anticipating leaving a good chunk of time for questions. So feel free to drop those in the Q&A as we go, but I'm going to hold them until the end if possible. Great. So I want to share a little bit. When I came to the city of Issaquah in the summer of 2021, the city had fairly recently, late 2019, adopted its very first strategic plan. And you can see one of the core parts of that strategic plan on to the left-hand side of the screen, which is our sort of strategic plan wheel that has our 6 goal areas aligned, and each of these goal areas has aligned actions and success measures. And along in that plan, on the right side of the screen, you can see our internal process wheel. And this process wheel, for the first time in the city's history, highlighted performance evaluation, and within that, the use of data as a part of how the city does business. In late 2020, the City Council adopted the city's first performance measurement plan. It was a beast of a plan. And this is a plan I inherited when I arrived at the city. It had 55 measures across all of those goal areas and a combination of departments and divisions. It was a mix of program level actions, outputs, short, medium, and long-term outcomes, and then what I would consider to be community level indicators or vital signs, things that the city doesn't directly maybe impact, but lets us know how the community is feeling and doing. Staff sentiment on this plan was mixed. You know, it was done in the early days of the pandemic when people were fairly isolated from one another, and we were still learning how to really collaborate in a hybrid work environment. So it's an imperfect plan, but it was good, as this acronym suggests, it was good enough to get going on. And so when I came to the city in 2021, I noticed a couple of things that had happened. So folks had taken that performance measurement plan to heart, and they had started gathering novel data, as well as researching and pulling historical data on the measures where the city already had it. But something was amiss. We were not seeing any sort of progress in performance. That the data sharing was just that. It was focused on sharing the numbers, but not necessarily on any analysis or explanation of that data. And staff were pretty consistently asking, but wait, why these measures? Why is this what council wants to see? And so you can get a sense from that there wasn't maybe the buy-in that had originally been hoped for. And this is where the What Works Cities certification came onto the floor for us in terms of how we wanted to pursue becoming a more data-driven organization. In 2021, we submitted our first self-assessment to the Bloomberg Foundation's What Works Cities initiative. And I think the real driver, our city administrator, had previously worked in a city that had also undergone this process, and he saw the real value that engaging in a holistic culture change around data, the positive impact that had not just on an IT department that was leading it or an executive team that was leading it, but on the entire organization in the way that it did its work. And I think what Bloomberg is really committed to is helping local governments use data to really use data and use it at scale. So helping you not just use data in one-off ways, but make it a part of the way that your city does what it does. And that looked a little bit different than the performance measurement plan that we had originally adopted. Performance and analytics, which you can see in this list of foundational practices, is really just one part of what the What Works Cities certification said constituted a city that was truly working in a data-driven way. And in fact, I wanted to share their theory of change that they shared with us as part of this project, because I think it's really powerful. That their theory is to start by building capacity within an organization and having that capacity drive organizational change and data-driven decision making. So actually building capacity first so that folks across your organization feel more invested in the use of data and actually start using it regularly in their decision making. And that through that organizational change, we drive results for our community. What Works Cities has been a great partner to us. I think it's helpful just at a high level to know the journey that one goes on as part of this certification process. It starts with that first self-assessment, and that allows you to join their certification community where they have a number of resources. They will be much better salespeople for their very free resources. The resources are everything from a community forum to one-off classes and sessions on particular elements of the certification process to entire what they call learning sprints. So multiple sessions in a row with the same instructors, and then all the way to sort of more personalized coaching. So we actually ended up engaging in personalized coaching with them, which is what I'm going to share a little bit more about what we learned as a city and what we were able to do through that process. But as you engage in the certification community and you submit documentation to support your certification process, you're able to work with a coach to develop a plan and then ultimately work over time. And I'll share with you the arc of our journey to work over time to achieve certification. You're probably wondering, okay, but how do you do that? Like, that's nice. Those slides were delightful, but how do you go from having performance measures to becoming a data-driven organization? So I want to share the story of the City of Issaquah and how we engaged in our own data-driven journey. For those of you unfamiliar with the City of Issaquah, I would consider 40,000 to be small, but a small to medium-sized city, just about 20 minutes outside of Seattle along I-90. Our city is about 280 full-time staff across 10 different departments. We're a full-service city, including a jail, which I know is not the norm for many of cities in Washington state, court, a local municipal court, utilities, planning, economic development, parks, and community service. We are a strong mayor city with a 7-member city council, and we are home to Costco headquarters, REI headquarters. We have a Providence Swedish hospital, and we're home to a large portion of technology sector employees that work in the neighboring communities. I also included here a picture of our Jakob Two Trees, our troll that joined us about a little over a year ago. Our arts team is one of our most data-driven divisions within our city, and so I think it's important to highlight the incredible work that they've done to draw through their data-driven work to draw even more art to our community. I want to share with you the approach that I took in helping us move from a city with performance measures to a city that really uses data in all aspects of what we do. My approach was fourfold. One, to assess the data maturity of the organization. Second, to work to identify, understand, and nurture bright spots within the org. Third, to establish relationships and high expectations and build a real culture of consistency around the use of data. And lastly, to develop and evolve our program to meet the diverse needs of the different individuals and teams across the city. Data-driven decision-making is going to look fairly different depending on the data you're working with, depending on the data you have access to, and the skills within your work group. But I do think it's possible for every team to find meaningful data to drive more informed decisions. So this fourfold approach place over the course of really 5 years, and I showed up in the middle. I already referenced the work in 2019 and 2020, but I want to highlight just the work in 2021, 22, and 23. We made our first What Works Cities certification submission in 2021, and our focus was really on performance and analytics. In the attachment for the presentation, which thank you for dropping that in the chat at the top, there's a handout that lists all of the What Works Cities certification criteria. If you want to pull that up and look at it as I talk, it could be a helpful visual. We really focused on performance and analytics because we had a strategic plan that had a number of success measures within it, and we had our performance measurement plan. So we already knew that we had some meaningful measures that folks were gathering that aligned to their programs. In 2022, we expanded our focus to be not just on performance and analytics, but to really focus on the basics of data management and data governance, making sure that we had the infrastructure in place to support sharing data, gathering data, that we knew where data lived within our IT systems and where was a secure place to house it. I also really focused on leadership and capacity development, ensuring that our leaders in every department, we had data leaders in every department, regardless of where they sat in the hierarchy. We had someone in every department that had the skills to become a data champion for their particular work group. And if you've opened the attachment, you'll see how big a role contracting and grant making play in this process. So much of the work that we do is done through partnerships or through paid agreements with vendors. And so really making sure that our contracting and grant making was as results driven as it could be was a huge focus for our team in 2022. And along with that, as we worked on our first biennial budget, we started to think about how could we ensure through small tweaks in the process that our budget process was more data-driven than it had been previously. We saw some pretty significant steps forward in 2022, but we still really struggled to change the culture. We still weren't seeing a lot of progress necessarily in performance, but at least people had built the sort of muscle memory. They were getting comfortable with sharing data. And they stopped asking so much of why do we want to see these particular measures, which was a good sign. In 2023, you can see that we focused on a lot of the same stuff because we really needed to prove that this kind of work, working with data at the forefront of our decision making, was not going to be a fad. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I built that consistency in a moment. But we also expanded to think about program evaluation, establishing an open data portal, and coming back to performance and analytics again to figure out how we could build on what we already had. Our journey of progress in 2021 and 2022 was less than stellar. Our first submission to What Works Cities, the foot in the door, so to say, we met one certification criteria. And I think a lot of people, when they look at the certification process, think to themselves, there's no way that our city can meet all of this in one fell swoop. And I'm here to tell you, I agree. I don't think many small cities can. And actually, I think it would be to our detriment if we tried to, because we'd be creating unsustainable change. So in 2022, we met 7. And it had felt like gargantuan work to get to 7. However, I think what is really a testament to culture change is that between 2022 and 2023, we were able to make the leap from 7 to 26. And I think that is not because we did anything particularly aggressively different, but we continued to work on what we had already been working on. And I'm going to talk about the 3 problems and the 3 initiatives that we established in 2023 that allowed us to make the final push forward from 7 to 26 criteria met. One of the first problems that I encountered when assessing data maturity, that first element of what I said my approach had been, was that I found that data maturity was uneven across the organization, which prevented a lot of what number 2 was going to be, which was scaling bright spots. Data analysis was viewed as extra work or one particular person's work. And so the solution was to really build the bench and celebrate staff members who were interested in data, who were invested in using it, and who wanted to build new skills and demonstrate value add on their teams. The first thing we did was established a cross-departmental data-driven decision-making team. And this group really focused on data literacy and culture rather than governance. The governance team was really more about the IT infrastructure, as well as our code around how we handle data, how we keep it safe. This group was about the culture. This group was about how do we make data fun? How do we make data something that people want to learn how to use? And what's the training that needs to be in place for people to grow? This group ensured that our approach to data literacy and training was relevant, that it reflected the real work that folks were doing in different departments, and helped design that data literacy. So that became our DDDM team, our data-driven decision-making team, which you can see is made up of a real mix of folks from across the org. So, some managers, in one case, a department director, but in many cases, folks at the analyst or the specialist or the coordinator level. But it was important to identify staff who were interested, who have some degree of influence and had capacity to work on this team. But what was, I think, most important and ended up being the biggest benefit to culture change and shift around data was that we had shared ownership of the products we developed. So while I led the team, convened the team, chaired our meetings, the work product that we created was shared by everyone on the team. And when it was ultimately shared with the organization, I was not the mouthpiece for that data sharing, which I think was really key to its success. The other problem that I very quickly saw, and I've mentioned this a few times, is that our citywide performance measures didn't really feel relevant to the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month work that my colleagues across the city were doing. And so our solution here was to define and start tracking measures that did feel relevant and that were aligned to citywide measures and goals. The approach here was to meet quarterly with work groups to build their data literacy and analytics skills so they could quickly make meaning of their data, and then also to work with them on program performance. Program performance, I have found time and again, is the most meaningful way that my colleagues want to talk about their work. And so rarely were we measuring and communicating in that way. We were talking about actions, and then we were talking about community outcomes. And it felt like we were missing this big window of work in the middle that really drew the line between those two items. So really what that looked like was sitting in a meeting every quarter with our program managers and helping them define, if they hadn't already, the North Star for each of their projects and initiatives, helping them to establish a plan to determine how they'll know if they're getting there, setting goals every quarter, and then checking back in on those goals when we'd meet the next quarter, and then developing tracking tools where appropriate. Our city, I would say the one big financial investment that we have made in performance analytics in particular has been in Microsoft Power BI. The ability to quickly visualize and communicate data and trends has been a game changer for how folks feel about the information that they're collecting and how they can use it. And then the third problem I wanted to talk about was our use of data in public communications. We communicate a lot, but we were really missing an opportunity to increase the nutrition of our communication. One of the first things that my city administrator said to me about data and decision makers is he said, decision makers know they should be using data, but sometimes that data to them is just like vegetables. They know it's important, but they don't really know what vitamins and nutrients they're getting from any particular vegetable. And so what we had to think about was, how do we build awareness around the why of data in public communications so that we could invest our team in wanting to share more nutritious information with the community. We started sourcing stories from underrepresented work groups that felt like nobody really sees the work we're doing. Public Works has been a great partner as we think about how to put more data in communication. And this really spurred what we call now Data Tuesdays. So our communications team leads a Data Tuesday, and it started off as a weekly initiative when we were getting it off the ground, and now it's a monthly initiative where we post across our social media platforms a post that's really rich with information. And you can see some examples, not super well formatted on my side, I gotta say, but where instead of just posting about a staff training, or instead of just posting about how much we love our farmers market volunteers, we shared more information about the impact of those farmers market volunteers. So we actually shared the number of volunteers and their number of hours. For paving, instead of just posting, hey, it's paving season, look out for road closures, we actually shared, this is how many lane miles we hope to pave this year. This is how many potholes we had to pave last year, and why the paving this summer is so important. And similar for things, we are a city that's very proud of our environmental stewardship and restoration. But instead of just talking about planting a lot of trees, actually sharing how many trees or native plants have we planted, how far along is that on our way to the goal that we have. And we saw a lot of engagement in these posts, and a lot of folks who were really, I won't say surprised, but were grateful to have a little bit more information about what exactly the city is doing on a day in, day out basis. So I'll start to wrap it up here because I think we're coming to a good pausing point. And I just want to share a little bit about the lessons that I learned and some tools that you might use as you think about where you are on your data-driven journey. So first and foremost, I'd recommend really taking a change management approach. Allow yourself to have this process be incremental and embedded in your pre-existing processes where possible. We saw a lot of success when we just made little changes to how we were doing something that included embedding a data analysis rather than changing a process entirely. We also found that people were more excited to share information or to offer up new data that they could analyze when it addressed a pain point they already had. And also to build on what we're already doing and what we already believe in as a way to really make that growth exponential. So finding your champions, finding your folks that are already using data or are data curious, how can you help them become a proof point for success that gets other folks interested and wanting to build similar skills? And then building the bench, find and uplift the champions, embed with other change management efforts. I think one of our most successful ones has been really bringing data into our equity framework process. We were already undergoing a process of recentering our work around equity, but at the time, it actually lacked a data element, a gathering of data or data to demonstrate that whatever intervention we had approached was actually having the intended impact. By tweaking that slightly and partnering the use of data into that pre-existing effort, not only did we see folks believe in it more, but we also saw more uptake more quickly. And then build on what you're already doing with a clear theory of progress. I honestly think I know some other really great performance leaders around the region here in the Puget Sound who are taking like the exact opposite approach. I think whichever approach you take, it can work. I think what is most important is that you have a clear theory of how you think your org will get from where it is to where you'd like it to be. So you're probably thinking, okay, great. Thanks for sharing about Issaquah. That was nice. But what about my agency? And so this is where, again, I'm going to reference that handout one more time. And I'm going to give you an activity that you can do for yourself or with your organization. What Works Cities provides a little bit of guidance here. They actually tell you the three criteria that they believe are the most important foundational criteria for starting out on your journey to become a more data-driven organization. And that is the first criterion in data management, implementing data strategy and governance. The first criterion in leadership capacity, having an executive commitment to data-informed government. And the first criterion in performance and analytics, selecting and using performance metrics for strategic goals and priorities. So if you're wondering, where should I start? These three are a great place to start. You also likely might want to do a self-assessment. So with the handout that I've provided today, you can do it right then and right here and now. You can open that handout and look at it and say, like, green dot on this one, we're already doing this as a city. We feel good about this. Yellow or like a maybe question mark would be, we'd like to do this, but that's not something I feel like my organization is ready for yet. And then a red dot or maybe a big X that says, whoa, I don't even know how to start doing that. And you might be a little intimidated even by it. We actually had our leadership team and our managers engage in this self-assessment process, and it did a couple of things that were really valuable. One, it helped us see things that I couldn't see on my own. And so I didn't necessarily have a good line of sight into every single division and every single work group. And by having them engage in this process and put up stickers with their initials on them, I could see where our leadership across the organization felt like, hey, I'm already doing this and I feel pretty good about it. I'm not really sure about this. You can see in this example here, lots of yellow around use of data in public communications, but lots of green in promotion of data and evidence. And then, maybe very clear on places that people weren't quite ready to go yet. So what I would encourage you following today, if this is something that still seems exciting to you, I would encourage you to engage in an activity like this individually, or perhaps with your organization, or even with your individual team, if that's the group that you're really focused on right now. And with that, I'll pause. The only last slide on here is just my contact information. So I'll just pause now for any questions, and hopefully I've got some answers.
Hi, yes, we have a couple of good questions in the comments. So the first one is, how have you addressed fear of sharing data with the public? For example, if we set a goal and we don't meet it, it might provide fodder for criticism.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think that the fear is real, and I think we didn't start with data that we were worried was going to be really critical right away. We started with sharing data that folks felt comfortable about, or sharing data that folks were proud of, or that we felt was informative. I think starting with data that allows your staff to feel a bit of pride can go a long way in building their buy-in to how it can be important. I think the fear is still real. I think we talk a lot about the real challenge with our open data portal is data without any sort of explanation along with it. And I think that has been what freaks people out a bit more than, say, our performance dashboard with our performance measures, where our data managers are able to actually tell the story of the data over time. So we do an annual update on our performance measures, but each of those data drops includes some analysis and explanation. We really believe at the city that the data work is about ultimately getting to tell the story, and so that it is important to be able to do that. And giving staff a voice in telling the story when we share data. The fear is real. I have a little at my desk at work. I have a little post-it note that says "Face the fear" on it, because it is real, and it's something that you've got to build comfort over time. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine to start with something that feels that you feel proud of or a little more comfort in, especially if you're feeling a lot of resistance from staff around sharing data.
So how do you involve staff in determining what data to share or in sharing the data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think and I should be clear, we are on the journey. We are in a far better place than we were in 2021. I still think we have a long way to go. But part of the work that I've been engaged in is just building consistency around the expectations that we use data in our work. Honestly, by building relationships and showing up consistently with staff members. And so prior to my arrival at the city, this is going to be a long-winded way to answering this question, but prior to my arrival at the city, it was just sort of email me the data, and I'll do the work. And so what I really wanted to shift around that was, I actually want to go and sit with you in your office, your building, your place of work, and let's meet once a quarter and talk about what you're seeing in your data. So even if it's an annual performance measure, I know that work is ongoing work. Say it's number of catch basins inspected. That's one of the 9 measures that our public works team reports on annually. Going and meeting with our stormwater manager once a quarter to check in on his measures, check in on how he's feeling, and seeing if there's anything I can do, or if there's a story around his work he wants to tell. So I think it's kind of how to get people more comfortable is kind of multifold. It's sort of establish consistency, help them understand the value and the importance of sharing their story, help them cultivate the story, help them actually tell the story. I would say have been the big 3 pieces. And then also, where there are measures that after a few years, that individual says, could you explain to me why council wants to see this? Advocating in those instances, we've reduced some of the performance measures we actually report on now, because I've taken that feedback and taken that back to our decision makers and said, it doesn't really make sense that we have 12 measures here. We really could have 9. Those are going to tell the same story. And this other measure, the data is not something we gather currently really helping them see like they're not just reporting because they got a report, that this is really a partnership process over time. So I would say that's been a lot of how we've gotten to a place of helping the department staff feel more invested and helping them put together their stories around their data.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. One is, are there ways that state government, state agencies can support small cities with similar processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's been great to work with, it was great working with Bloomberg, clearly like a philanthropic organization, nonprofit, because they're doing such a good job bringing together examples from other jurisdictions. So when I was like, oh, we need a data governance policy, I could go to them and they could say, oh, here are 15 data governance policies. I do really think that there's a role to be played at the state level in collating some of those resources for cities that are looking to move from wherever they might be to become a more data-driven org. And then it always feels silly to say like conferences like this one, but I think opportunities to connect with and learn from other cities who are interested or really trying to use data more in the workplace. And then of course, I think actually the way that data-driven decision making shows up in every facet of what we do is fairly different. And so I think if there's a role to be played on helping sector specific roles. So what does data-driven public works leadership look like? What does data-driven community and planning and development work look like? I'd love to see the role that could be played of having that show up in more specific parts of our work rather than just it's going to show up at the WCMA and it's going to show up at those sort of high level executive leadership places. But I think it's so valuable in each and every one of the work that we do in all of our different departments. And so potentially the work that could be done to bring together leaders in each of our teams around how they use data and how they use it more successfully over time.
Great, thank you. We have another one in the chat here. Would you have any suggestions for how employees who are required to provide data but see no results from management in our work areas? What could we do to help create the change?
That is a great question. So what I hear is employees who themselves feel like maybe they're at the part of the data journey where they're doing the collection and the sharing, but maybe aren't touching the analysis piece and maybe they're not in a seat where they feel like they can change the way work is being done to impact that performance. I mean, I think there are a few different ways that you might be able to impact that. And it depends a little bit probably on the culture of your organization. But I think one thing that we've done, and I'd be happy to share this visual in a moment, I could pull it up. We really feel that every employee within our city plays a role in what we call the Issaquah data journey. And that starts from step one, which is sort of defining questions and collecting information, to cleaning and ensuring the transformation of that data is going to be valuable, to then getting to the analyzing and visualizing, and then getting to the storytelling part. And we really empower all of our staff to feel like they don't have to just sit at one place. Like if they have a question and they'd like to see it answered, that they're empowered to ask questions about that, to really push and say, I've been sharing this data, or we've been gathering a lot of this information, and I've been sharing it with you. I also wanted to share, here's what I'm seeing in it, and it's making me wonder X, Y, and Z. And actually, it's been a really we launched this initiative called DataQuah, which is Issaquah, DataQuah, where any staff member can go through this data training process, and they get there are various benchmarks along the way, from Curious Coho to Data King Salmon. We're all about the salmon at the City of Issaquah. And it really helps staff members develop the skills to be able to talk to their colleagues and their supervisors about problems they're seeing and ideas they have for addressing those problems with the use of the data that they collect in their work. And so what I would encourage this person to do is to like foray beyond the collection and sharing, maybe give yourself a little bit of time to do a little analysis. Or if you don't want to say, here's the analysis I see, maybe to pose a couple questions when you share that data as a way to sort of reinforce that you can do you can do more maybe than you're being expected to do, but also that you have some insights, or there might be some questions that could help that manager as they bring the information forward. And so I know that's something that we've really tried to impress across our org. That's what we want people to do, is to continue to ask questions. And that's been really exciting. We're also a small org, so I think we benefit from that as well, because it can be really challenging to see something in the data and see it get ignored over and over again. I just want to empathize with that. Definitely been in situations like that as well.
Yeah. Got a reply. Thank you. Great answer to that. Thank you for that. This next question is, do you have any advice for agencies who want to be more data-driven but are not sure they have the right data? How do you know you're using the right data to answer questions?
Yep. Oh my gosh. Isn't that the right data, accurate data, valid data? It is an ongoing struggle. So I also just want to say I'm with you. There's some of our data sources right now that I feel really, really good about. And there are some data sources that we discover we don't feel so good about. And we might have been using that data to make decisions for a number of years. And then we say, oh, actually, I'm noticing an inconsistency. And as we've trained more staff in the last couple of years to be more data literate, we're finding more of those challenges within our data sources, which is both excellent because it means better data moving forward, but it's also a bit terrifying because it means we've been making decisions that maybe haven't been fully informed. My recommendation is to always start with the question. I think that's the most important piece. You need to know what you're trying to answer. And then I think it's to ask, honestly, I do a lot of asking of my colleagues in other jurisdictions of, hey, say it's something around our homeless outreach and behavioral health work. I know that we inquired with a lot of jurisdictions around us around what data that they were using or what data systems they're using. And we built our own system for a while. We are outgrowing that system. And so now it's getting time to make another decision around, okay, we probably need a new system. How do we know now that the system that we might purchase is going to be set up in a way that we can answer the questions that we've had? I think that's why I always recommend starting with the question. I highly recommend reaching out in your networks to find out what similar organizations, what data are they collecting or using? How are they collecting that data? And then I think in some cases, if the data is imperfect, I think it can be the wrong data in a lot of ways. It can be the wrong data because it's not helping you answer the question. It can be literally just wrong. The data can be invalid or inaccurate. And that's a whole different question to answer around the process of cleaning your data or validating sources. But I think it's really about giving yourself grace that this is an ongoing iterative process. You're going to continue to change your questions. You will hopefully continue to improve your data gathering technique. And that hopefully over time, this is about perfect is not the enemy of the good here. This is about going from not collecting anything and guessing to perfect, to collecting something better, to collecting something even better. And so that's the sort of in broad strokes, the recommendation I would have about that. Start with the question, get clear on a few things. If you can compare oranges to oranges with your neighbors, that's great because it gives you some reference points. But I would say start collecting rather than worrying too much about, do I have absolutely the right data? It's do you have the best data you can have right now to make the decisions you need to make?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Start with the question. Another question we have is, in this process, has there been any space for community groups to share their data with government and be part of the analysis process?
Yes, this is great. It's the thing I alluded to that I didn't get to in my presentation. One of our biggest pieces that I feel the most proud of in the work that we do is our use of data in our grant making work, both in our art grants and our human services grants. Our use of data to make decisions, but also our data sharing that we do with those organizations once they've become grantees. Both they're sharing data with us, and then us going to them and actually doing a really similar process to what I do with our departments around their data, which is actually sitting with them with their data and helping them make meaning of what they're seeing and helping them answer questions about the work they're doing and how we could continue to support them or how they could improve their performance over time. And so that's one of the big pieces that we do currently that I would actually like to see us do more of. But we do have really active relationships with the nonprofit organizations and art organizations in our broader community, and do a lot of data sharing with them, both that they share with us and we share with them, and some data skill building as well to help them continue to improve their own work and their own impact, which has been really powerful.
Thank you. So I think we have time for maybe one more question here. This question is, how do you compile and maintain data? Excel trackers, a dedicated system, or something else? And collecting and maintaining data for metrics citywide seems like it takes good planning so you can access the data easily.
Yes. So we use a few different systems within departments. Some of our departments have very established data systems and sources. So, across our facilities and public works teams, and our parks team, we have an enterprise asset management system that gathers a huge amount of information that can be aggregated to help us make a number of different decisions. Some of our departments simply do not have that data infrastructure. And so they have started with and they maintain Excel spreadsheets for a good amount of their work aligned to their program performance. I referenced Microsoft Power BI earlier as one of the investments that we've made when it comes to analysis and visualization. The thing, you got Tableau people, you got BI people, you got people that actually know how to code and so have their own systems that they use. All work. I am not here to evangelize any particular system. I like Microsoft Power BI because people are familiar with Microsoft, and it allows you to connect a number of different sources on the back end without a lot of needing to transform or manipulate the data until you get it into the system. And so we're able to use Microsoft Power BI to align the project management system that our IT department has with our finance system. And they can look at the actuals against where the project is in its project progress at the same time in the same Power BI report, which is super cool. The second part of that question around citywide metrics. Yes, it does take a lot of planning. I actually just put in my calendar today a tickle to remind myself to send out the beginning of my campaign of, we're getting close to the end of the year. If you need to take a cut right on December 31st, please remember to mark your calendar. We use SharePoint for our data sharing for that purpose. Every data manager has a system by which they pull their report at the time that makes the most sense for them. They link it to a place where they upload their performance data not in its raw form. They pull the report and they input the percentage or the number depending on how the shape of their measure annually. And our Power BI dashboard pulls directly from that SharePoint list that's been set up really specifically for that. So we have that sort of raw data to go and do the validation if we need to, but the managers themselves actually go through the process of getting the measure and then writing in the analysis themselves. That's been the big piece. I used to do that part, and now we've actually built it so that they feel comfortable doing that part, which has been a big part of the evolution of our program as well.
Wonderful. Well, Dale, thank you so much for this presentation, giving us a real world example of what you've been through, your journey, and where you're headed. That's been amazing. And I know it's been really helpful to those who are participating here today. A lot of great takeaways, a lot of great questions that were asked, a lot of good engagement in this presentation. I'd also like to thank all of you who showed up and hung with us through this presentation. We are so happy that you're here engaging in this conference with us. There will be a short survey that's going to pop up when this closes, so please take that. We definitely use your feedback and would love to give some feedback to Dale as well. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you again at the 3 o'clock session.
Thank you all.